The king is laughing at your joke about his wife's infidelity. The entire court is watching, some amused, others horrified. In 5 minutes, you could be rewarded with gold coins and a feast in your honor. Or you could be dragged to the dungeon. For treason, welcome to 1515 Florence. You're not a noble, not a merchant, not even a craftsman. You're something far more dangerous. You're a court jester. And in a world where a single word can mean the difference between wealth and execution, your survival depends on walking the thinnest line imaginable between truth and death. Lorenzo de' Medici the Younger receives you in his private study, a room lined with manuscripts and classical sculptures that represent the culmination of Renaissance learning and taste. But despite the scholarly atmosphere, the conversation that follows is pure realpolitik, the kind of discussion that would be treason if overheard by the wrong people. Marco, Lorenzo begins without preamble. What do you know about the Duke? Of Ferrara's financial situation? It's a loaded question. Alfonso d'Este, Duke of Ferrara, is known to be struggling with debts accumulated from his father's military campaigns and his own expensive tastes in art and architecture. But admitting you know this information reveals the extent of your intelligence network, which could make you more valuable to Lorenzo or more dangerous to his enemies. I know that His Grace has exquisite taste in painters. You reply carefully. And that exquisite taste often comes with exquisite expenses. Lorenzo smiles at your diplomatic evasion. Indeed. And I also know that men facing exquisite expenses sometimes make pragmatic alliances. Tonight, I need to understand just how pragmatic the Duke might be willing to become. The conversation continues for another 20 minutes, during which Lorenzo provides you with specific information he wants you to extract and particular topics he wants you to explore. The Duke's attitude toward French intervention in Italian politics, his opinion of the new Pope, Leo X, his assessment of Venetian naval power, his personal relationship with his wife, Lucretia Borgia, whose family connections make her a political asset of enormous value. The challenge, Lorenzo explains, is that Alfonso is no fool. He'll recognize obvious intelligence gathering, and he'll be suspicious of direct political questions. That's why we need your particular talents. A jester can ask questions that would be impossible coming from a diplomat. It's true, but it's also what makes your position so precarious. Jesters are granted license to speak truths that others can't, but that license can be revoked instantly if you miscalculate. Too little information, and you're useless to your patron. Too much, and you become a threat that needs to be eliminated. Lorenzo dismisses you with final instructions. Remember, Marco, tonight you're not just entertaining our guests. You're serving Florence. The information you gather could influence whether we find ourselves allied with Ferrara or facing them across a battlefield. The weight of that responsibility settles on your shoulders as you leave the study. Court jesters are often portrayed as simple entertainers, but the reality is far more complex. You're a spy whose cover is comedy, a diplomat whose credentials are bells and motley, an intelligence operative whose weapons are wit and timing. The hours between your briefing and the evening feast are spent in careful preparation. You review your notes on the Duke of Ferrara, practice various conversational gambits that might elicit useful information, and mentally rehearse the personas you might need to adopt during the evening. The successful jester is essentially a method actor, capable of shifting between different characters and emotional registers with seamless precision. Your costume for tonight is carefully chosen to project the right balance of harmlessness and sophistication. The traditional motley is present, but made from expensive fabrics that suggest you're valued by your patron. The bells are silver rather than brass, indicating your elevated status. The pointed cap is decorated with clever embroidery that demonstrates wit and learning. Every detail is calculated to position you as entertaining, but not frivolous, clever, but not threatening. As evening approaches and guests begin arriving at the palace, you take your position in the Great Hall, ready to begin the most dangerous performance of your career. The morning mist clings to the cobblestones of Florence as you hurry through the narrow streets toward the Palazzo Vecchio, your bells jingling softly with each step. The year is 1515, and Lorenzo de' Medici the Younger has just sent word that he requires your services for a particularly delicate entertainment. The message, delivered by a nervous page who couldn't meet your eyes, was brief but ominous. His Magnificence desires your wit for tonight's feast. The Duke of Ferrara will be in attendance. You know what this means. Political theater disguised as entertainment. The Duke of Ferrara is considering an alliance with Florence, but rumors suggest he's also been courting Venice and the Papal States. Lorenzo needs information, needs to gauge the Duke's true intentions, and needs to do it in a way that maintains plausible deniability. That's where you come in, Marco Benedetti, court jester, professional fool, and the only person in the city who can ask dangerous questions while pretending to be harmless. Your real name isn't Marco Benedetti, of course. Court jesters rarely use their birth names, partly for protection and partly because the persona is more important than the person. You were born Giovanni Torriani in a village outside Mantua, the third son of a blacksmith who couldn't afford to feed all his children. Quick wit and a talent for mimicry were your only inheritance, and they've carried you further than your father's hammer ever could have. The path to becoming a court jester wasn't a career choice so much as a survival strategy. At 15, you were caught stealing bread from a merchant's cart and faced the choice between losing a hand or entertaining the magistrate with your excuses. Your improvised performance, a complex story involving talking ravens, a corrupt priest, and a case of mistaken identity, was so elaborate and amusing that the magistrate not only pardoned you but recommended you to a minor lord who was looking for entertainment. From there, it was a gradual climb through the social hierarchy, moving from one court to another as your reputation grew. Each position was a careful negotiation, impressive enough to be valuable, dangerous enough to be exciting, but never so threatening that you'd be eliminated as a security risk. It's a balance that requires constant vigilance and perfect pitch. The Palazzo Vecchio looms before you, its fortress-like walls an imposing tower, a reminder that Florentine power rests on more than just commerce and art. Guards nod as you approach. They know you by sight, and your jester's costume grants you access to places that would be forbidden to ordinary citizens. The motley cloth, the bells, the pointed cap, they're not just costume pieces, but a kind of diplomatic immunity that protects you as long as you remain within your prescribed role. Inside the palace, servants bustle with preparations for tonight's feast. The Great Hall is being decorated with tapestries and flowers. Tables are being arranged to accommodate dozens of guests, and kitchen staff are preparing dishes that will cost more than most people earn in a year. But underneath the festive preparations, you can sense the political tension that makes these gatherings so dangerous. Lorenzo's secretary, a thin man named Giuliano Salviati, who always looks like he's expecting bad news, intercepts you before you can reach the private chambers. His Magnificence is in conference with the Venetian ambassador. He whispers, but he wants to speak with you before the feast. You're to wait in the small antechamber and prepare your material for tonight. The antechamber is where you do your most important work, not the public performances that everyone sees, but the private preparation that makes those performances possible. Tonight's entertainment will require careful research into the Duke of Ferrara's background, his known weaknesses and obsessions, his political positions and personal scandals. You'll need to craft material that seems spontaneous, but is actually precisely calculated to extract information while maintaining the pretense of harmless foolery. Your traveling bag contains the tools of your trade, costume pieces for different characters, small props for physical comedy, and most importantly, a collection of notebooks containing information about noble families throughout Italy. These notebooks are your most valuable possessions and your most dangerous. They contain secrets that could topple governments, scandals that could destroy reputations, and political intelligence that various powers would kill to possess. The Great Hall of the Palazzo Vecchio has been transformed into a Renaissance fantasy of wealth and power. Tapestries depicting Medici victories hang from the walls. Hundreds of candles cast dancing shadows across marble floors. And tables laden with gold and silver plate create an impression of abundance that's both genuine and carefully calculated for political effect. Alfonso d'Este, Duke of Ferrara, enters with a retinue that announces his importance while subtly revealing his financial constraints. His clothing is magnificent, but not quite as magnificent as Lorenzo's. His servants are numerous, but not quite as numerous as a truly wealthy prince would maintain. His wife, the infamous Lucretia Borgia, wears jewels that are spectacular, but carefully chosen to make maximum impact with minimum expense. You watch from your designated position near the entertainment platform, studying the Duke's body language, facial expressions, and interaction patterns with his entourage. The successful jester must be part anthropologist, part psychologist, and part intelligence analyst, capable of reading subtle cues that reveal personality, motivation, and vulnerability. The Duke appears confident but not relaxed, suggesting someone who's comfortable with his status but concerned about maintaining it. His conversation with other guests is animated but controlled, indicating political awareness and careful self-presentation. His relationship with his wife seems genuine but formal, suggesting personal affection constrained by political necessity. Lorenzo signals for the entertainment to begin, and you take center stage with the elaborate bow that tradition requires. The opening moments of a jester's performance are crucial. You must establish the right tone, demonstrate your value to the host, and begin building rapport with your target audience without revealing your ulterior motives. Your magnificence, your graces, noble lords and ladies. You begin with theatrical formality. Tonight I come before you not as Marco the jester, but as Marco the seeker of truth. For what is a jester but a philosopher in motley, a scholar who trades wisdom for laughter? It's a calculated opening that positions you as more than simple entertainment while maintaining the playful tone expected from a court fool. The audience laughs politely, but you're watching the Duke's reaction specifically. He seems intrigued, rather than dismissive, which suggests an appreciation for intellectual wordplay that you can exploit. I have been traveling throughout Italy, you continue, studying the great question of our age. What makes a prince truly magnificent? Is it wealth, military power, political cunning? Or perhaps, you pause for dramatic effect, the ability to choose the right wife? The joke gets genuine laughter from the assembled nobles, but more importantly, it allows you to gauge the Duke's reaction to references about his marriage. Lucretia Borgia's reputation is complicated. She's brilliant and politically valuable, but her family history includes scandals that some consider liabilities. The Duke's response to marriage humor will tell you how he views his wife's political utility versus her potential drawbacks. Alfonso laughs heartily and raises his wine cup in a toast to his wife, which suggests confidence in their alliance and dismissal of the various rumors about her past. This is useful intelligence. It indicates that Ferrari's policy is likely to be influenced by Borgia family interests, which have traditionally favored French over imperial alliances. But speaking of magnificent choices, you continue, shifting the focus to gather different intelligence. I have noticed that the most successful princes are those who know when to be lions and when to be foxes. Your Grace, you address the Duke directly. You have the reputation of a man who understands the wisdom of Machiavelli. In these troubled times, do you find yourself more often playing the lion or the fox? It's a dangerously direct question disguised as philosophical banter. Machiavelli's writings on princely behavior are well known in educated circles, but asking a ruler to characterize his own approach to power is essentially asking him to reveal his strategic thinking. The Duke could deflect with humor, engage seriously, or take offense at the implication that his rule requires deception. Alfonso considers the question thoughtfully, suggesting intellectual engagement rather than defensive reaction. An interesting question, Marco. I would say that wisdom lies in knowing which approach serves your people best. The lion protects through strength, the fox through cleverness. A good prince uses both as circumstances require. The answer is diplomatically perfect and strategically revealing. By emphasizing service to his people and balanced approaches, the Duke is signaling flexibility and pragmatism, exactly the qualities that would make him willing to shift alliances based on practical considerations, rather than ideological commitments. You file this information away while continuing the performance, gradually building toward more specific intelligence, gathering while maintaining the entertainment value that justifies your presence. As the evening progresses and wine flows more freely, the atmosphere in the Great Hall becomes more relaxed, creating opportunities for the kind of probing questions that would be impossible in formal diplomatic settings. Court jesters exist in a unique social space that allows them to breach normal conversational boundaries while maintaining plausible deniability. After all, they're just entertainers seeking material for their acts. You've moved on from the opening performance to circulating among the guests, engaging in the kind of informal banter that often yields more valuable intelligence than formal interviews. The Duke of Ferrara has proven to be an engaging conversationalist with a genuine appreciation for wit and wordplay, making him both an ideal target and a dangerous opponent. "Your Grace," you say during a lull in his conversation with other nobles, "I've been pondering a riddle that perhaps your wisdom could solve. If a prince must choose between a wealthy ally who demands much and a poor ally who offers loyalty, which choice serves his people better?" It's a thinly veiled reference to Alfonso's current situation. He can ally with Venice, which has money but will expect significant concessions, or with France, which offers military support but has limited financial resources to share. His response will indicate which way he's leaning in the complex. Negotiations currently shaping Italian politics. The Duke studies you with sharp eyes, clearly recognizing the political subtext of your riddle. For a moment, the friendly mask slips, and you see the calculating intelligence that has kept Ferrara independent despite pressure from much larger powers. "A fascinating riddle, Marco," he replies slowly. "But perhaps the wise prince seeks a third option, an ally who offers both resources and respect, who understands that true partnerships require mutual benefit rather than subordination." It's a sophisticated answer that reveals several important things. Alfonso is not yet committed to either Venice or France. He's looking for arrangements that preserve Ferrara's independence, and he's open to creative solutions that transcend traditional alliance patterns. For Lorenzo, this information could be crucial in crafting offers that might win Ferrari's support for Florentine initiatives. But the Duke's sharp look also warns you that you're approaching the limits of what can be discussed under the guise of entertainment. Push too hard, and you risk exposing your intelligence-gathering mission. Retreat too quickly, and you might miss opportunities to gather crucial information. You decide to shift tactics, moving toward more personal territory that might reveal character traits and motivations that could be exploited in future negotiations. Your Grace, as someone who studies human nature for professional purposes, I'm curious about your thoughts on trust. In your experience, what makes one person trustworthy and another unreliable? The question seems innocent enough. A jester seeking philosophical insights to inform his character observations. But it's actually designed to understand how Alfonso evaluates potential allies and what criteria he uses to assess diplomatic reliability. Trust, the Duke muses, swirling wine in his goblet, is earned through consistency between words and actions over time. The trustworthy person keeps small promises as faithfully as large ones, because they understand that reliability is a habit, not a convenience. It's a thoughtful answer that suggests Alfonso values long-term relationships over short-term advantages, which could indicate willingness to honor alliance commitments even when circumstances change. But it also suggests he'll expect the same consistency from potential allies, making Florentine diplomacy more challenging if promises can't be kept. The conversation is interrupted by a commotion near the main entrance to the hall. A messenger has arrived with news urgent enough to breach normal court protocol, and Lorenzo is huddled in serious conversation with his advisors. From the expressions on their faces, the news is significant and probably bad. You catch fragments of whispered conversation. French forces, papal territories, Spanish response. It sounds like the delicate balance of Italian politics is shifting again, which could make tonight's intelligence gathering either more urgent or completely irrelevant depending on the specific developments. Lorenzo signals for you to continue entertaining the guests while he deals with the crisis. But you can see that the Duke of Ferrara is also watching the commotion with sharp interest. His political instincts are clearly as acute as his intellectual ones, and he's probably drawing his own conclusions about what the news might mean for his alliance calculations. The challenge now is to continue gathering information, while the political situation is potentially changing in real time, making your intelligence either more valuable or more dangerous with each passing moment. The urgent news that interrupted the evening's festivities proves to be a game changer that transforms your intelligence mission from routine espionage to potential survival strategy. French forces have crossed into papal territory. Spanish troops are mobilizing in Naples, and the delicate balance that has kept the Italian peninsula from exploding into full-scale war is beginning to collapse. Lorenzo returns to the Great Hall with the controlled composure of an experienced politician, but you can read the tension in his posture and the careful way he's scanning the faces of his guests. Everyone in the room understands that the news changes everything. Alliance calculations that made sense this morning might be fatal mistakes by tomorrow. The Duke of Ferrara has also recognized the significance of the developments. His casual demeanor has been replaced by the alert focus of someone mentally recalculating political odds and strategic options. The friendly philosophical discussion you were having minutes ago suddenly feels like a luxury that circumstances no longer permit. "My lords and ladies," Lorenzo announces with practiced calm, "I have received news that requires some adjustments to our evening's plans. The kitchen staff will be serving our final courses shortly, after which we'll conclude tonight's festivities earlier than originally intended." It's diplomatic language for everyone needs to leave so we can figure out how to survive the crisis that's developing. But it's delivered with the smooth courtesy that maintains civilized appearances even when civilization is fracturing. You realize that your position has become exponentially more dangerous. As a jester with access to sensitive information about multiple courts, you're potentially valuable to various factions as a source of intelligence. But you're also potentially dangerous to those same factions if your knowledge falls into enemy hands. In times of political crisis, people with your profile often disappear to prevent security leaks. The Duke of Ferrara approaches you as guests begin making their diplomatic farewells. "Marco," he says quietly, "your riddles tonight have been most enlightening. Perhaps we might continue our philosophical discussions under different circumstances." It sounds like a social pleasantry, but the underlying message is clear. Alfonso is interested in direct communication outside the formal diplomatic channels. Whether that represents an opportunity or a trap depends on factors you can't yet evaluate. Your Grace honors me with your interest, you reply carefully. Philosophy is indeed more rewarding when practiced among appreciative students of wisdom. It's a non-committal response that acknowledges his interest without making any commitments, buying you time to assess the risks and opportunities of direct contact with thee. The Duke nodded as the evening dissolves into hurried departures and whispered conversations. You find yourself in the dangerous position of knowing too much about everyone's intentions, while being uncertain about your own safety. The political crisis has made your information more valuable and your person more vulnerable, a combination that historically doesn't end well for court jesters. Lorenzo summons you for a brief private conversation before you're dismissed for the evening. Marco, I need hardly tell you that tonight's intelligence is now crucial to Florence's survival. But I also need hardly tell you that possessing such intelligence makes you a target for anyone who wants to influence Florentine decision-making. The warning is delivered with paternal concern, but the underlying message is clear. Your usefulness to Lorenzo depends on your continued discretion, and your survival depends on your continued usefulness to Lorenzo. It's the kind of circular logic that keeps court jesters awake at night, wondering whether their patrons view them as assets to be protected or liabilities to be eliminated. Your magnificence, you respond. A jester's greatest talent is knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Tonight's performance has reminded me of the wisdom of both. It's the kind of ambiguous statement that commits you to nothing while suggesting complete loyalty. A diplomatic skill that's as essential to jester survival as wit and timing dot. As you leave the palace and make your way through Florence's dark streets toward your lodgings, you're acutely aware that the game you've been playing for years has suddenly become much more deadly, and the rules you've learned might no longer apply. Dawn breaks over Florence with the pale light that seems to promise normalcy, but delivers only the illumination to see how dramatically everything has changed overnight. You wake in your modest apartments near Santa Croce to find a message slipped under your door during the night. Unsigned, written in a hand you don't recognize, but bearing the seal of someone with enough authority to command your attention. Your services may be required for private consultation. Await further instruction. Destroy this message. The note could be from Lorenzo, seeking private debriefing about last night's intelligence gathering. It could be from the Duke of Ferrara, following up on his interest in continuing your philosophical discussions. Or it could be from any number of other parties who have learned of your access to sensitive information and want to exploit it. For their own purposes, court jesters live in a world of constant uncertainty about who they're really working for and who might be working against them. Loyalty is a luxury that few can afford when survival depends on maintaining value to multiple competing interests simultaneously. You burn the message as instructed, but not before memorizing every detail of the handwriting, paper quality, and seal design. In your profession, such details can mean the difference between walking into a legitimate meeting and walking into a trap designed to eliminate inconvenient witnesses. The morning brings other signs that last night's political crisis is reshaping the landscape of Italian politics. Church bells are ringing more frequently than usual, suggesting official communications between religious and secular authorities. Merchants in the market are discussing disruptions in trade routes and speculation about which cities might be safe for commercial investments. Even the street performers are incorporating political themes into their acts, testing public sentiment about various alliance possibilities. Your landlord, a practical man named Giuseppe, who rents rooms to various artists and entertainers, intercepts you as you prepare to leave for the day. Marco, he says with the nervous smile of someone delivering unwelcome news, I've had visitors asking about your habits, your schedule, your associations. They seemed like respectable people, well-dressed, polite. But they were asking the kind of questions that make a man wonder whether his tenant is becoming more trouble than the rent is worth. It's a gentle warning delivered with genuine concern, but the message is clear. Your presence is attracting unwanted attention that could endanger not just yourself, but anyone associated with you. In times of political crisis, guilt by association becomes a real danger, and prudent people distance themselves from individuals who might be targets. Giuseppe, you reply with what you hope is reassuring confidence. I appreciate your concern and your discretion. Perhaps it would be wise for me to spend a few days visiting friends in the countryside, while the current excitement settles down. It's a face-saving solution that allows both of you to pretend you're choosing to leave rather than being forced out, but it also commits you to actually finding somewhere safe to go until the immediate danger passes. The challenge is that in times of political crisis, few places are genuinely safe for someone with your profile. Other courts might view you as a valuable intelligence asset or a dangerous security risk. Monasteries might offer sanctuary, but would require abandoning your profession permanently. Rural areas might provide physical safety, but no protection against determined pursuers with resources and motivation. Your best option might be to stay in Florence, but assume a different identity temporarily, using the performance skills that make you valuable as a jester to disappear into the city's population of ordinary citizens. But that strategy would require abandoning the income and social position that make your current life possible, essentially starting over with nothing but the clothes on your back and the knowledge in your head as you consider your limited options. Another message arrives, this one delivered by a child who runs away before you can question him. The note is brief and specific. Church of Santo Spirito, noon. Confessional booth on the left. Come alone. The location suggests someone who understands the need for secrecy, but also someone with enough religious connections to arrange use of church facilities for clandestine meetings. The timing gives you several hours to prepare, but also several hours to worry about what kind of situation you might be walking into. The afternoon following your mysterious church meeting passes in a haze of anxiety and calculation as you try to evaluate options that all seem to lead toward disaster. Remaining loyal to Lorenzo provides familiar protection, but might not be adequate if the political crisis escalates. Accepting the unknown patron's offer provides potential safety, but requires trusting someone whose identity and motivations remain completely mysterious. You spend several hours walking through Florence's streets, using movement and crowds to prevent surveillance, while your mind works through the strategic implications of each choice. The city itself seems to reflect your internal turmoil. Normal activities continue, but there's an undercurrent of tension as citizens sense the political changes could affect their daily lives in unpredictable ways. Near the Arno, you encounter Niccolò Machiavelli taking his usual afternoon walk along the riverbank. The former secretary to the Florentine Republic is currently out of favor politically, but remains one of the most acute observers of Italian politics, making him both a valuable source of advice and a potential security risk. Niccolò, you greet him with careful casualness. I trust the afternoon finds you well? As well as any man can be when his country tears itself apart, while its leaders pretend that temporary alliances constitute permanent solutions. He replies with characteristic bluntness. But I suspect you have more immediate concerns than my philosophical pessimism. Machiavelli's reputation for political insight is matched by his ability to read people and situations, making it impossible to hide your current anxiety from his penetrating gaze. The question is whether confiding in him would provide valuable counsel or dangerous exposure. I find myself considering a career change, you say carefully, and wondering whether the current political climate makes such changes more or less advisable. It's a veiled way of asking whether switching patrons during a crisis is strategically sound. And Machiavelli's response will reveal whether he sees such moves as pragmatic adaptation or dangerous opportunism. Career changes during political upheavals can be either brilliant strategic moves or fatal miscalculations. He muses, watching the river flow toward the Mediterranean. The determining factor is usually whether one changes sides or changes loyalties. Changing sides based on superior offers is often wise. Changing loyalties based on superior principles is usually suicide. The Church of Santo Spirito represents the pinnacle of Renaissance architectural achievement, its perfect proportions, and mathematical harmony, reflecting the humanist belief that divine truth could be understood through reason and artistic beauty. But as you enter the nave at precisely noon, the building's spiritual serenity feels like a fragile shell surrounding the political intrigue that has brought you here. The church is busy with the normal activities of midday prayers and confession, providing ideal cover for a clandestine meeting while also creating multiple witnesses who might remember your presence if anyone comes looking for you later. You approach the designated confessional booth with the nervous reverence of someone who's genuinely seeking absolution. Though your sins are more political than spiritual, the voice that greets you from behind the confessional screen is cultured, intelligent, and completely unfamiliar. "Bless me, Father, for I have sinned," comes the traditional opening, delivered with subtle irony that suggests your contact appreciates the theatrical aspects of the situation. "My child," you respond, playing the role of confessor despite having no religious authority. "Speak freely of what troubles your conscience." "I am troubled by the gap between appearance and reality in matters of state," the voice continues. "I see princes who claim to serve their people while serving themselves, allies who betray their commitments when convenient, and advisors who mistake cleverness for wisdom." It's a philosophical statement that doubles as a political assessment, and it tells you several important things about your contact. He's educated enough to engage in abstract discussion, politically sophisticated enough to understand the complexities of current Italian politics, and cynical enough to question the motives of major players in the current crisis. "Such troubles are common in our age," you reply carefully. "Perhaps you could be more specific about which aspects of this gap cause you the greatest concern." "I am concerned about a certain jester whose recent performance revealed knowledge that could be valuable to various parties currently negotiating the future of Italy. Such knowledge makes its possessor both precious and dangerous, often simultaneously." The direct reference to your situation eliminates any pretense that this is a casual conversation. Your contact knows exactly who you are and why you might be valuable, which means he also knows why you might need protection or elimination depending on his agenda. "And what solution would you propose for addressing such concerns?" you ask, accepting that subtlety is no longer possible. "I would propose that the jester in question consider whether his current patron provides adequate protection for someone in his position, and whether alternative arrangements might serve his interests better." It's a recruitment pitch disguised as spiritual guidance, and it puts you in the impossible position of having to evaluate an offer from someone whose identity and motivations remain completely unknown. The offer could represent genuine protection from a powerful patron, or it could be a trap designed to separate you from Lorenzo's protection so you can be eliminated more easily. "Such decisions require careful consideration," you reply, buying time to think through the implications. Perhaps the concerned party could provide more specific information about the nature of these alternative arrangements. The concerned party represents interests that value the jester's unique talents and would provide protection, compensation, and opportunities for advancement significantly superior to his current situation. but such arrangements would require complete loyalty and absolute discretion. The offer is tempting: better protection, more money, and potentially more interesting work. But it's also exactly the kind of proposition that destroys jesters who miscalculate the reliability of their new patrons. Switching sides in the middle of a political crisis is inherently dangerous, and doing it based on promises from unidentified contacts is usually fatal. I appreciate the concerned party's interest, you say finally, but such momentous decisions require time for reflection and prayer. Perhaps we might continue this conversation after I've had opportunity to consider the spiritual implications. It's a delaying tactic that avoids commitment while keeping the option open, but you're not sure whether your contact will accept postponement or interpret it as rejection. Of course, comes the reply after a pause that suggests consideration of your response. The concerned party understands the wisdom of careful deliberation, but he also understands that current circumstances may not permit extended reflection. You have until tomorrow evening to complete your spiritual considerations. The ultimatum is delivered with polite courtesy, but the underlying threat is unmistakable. Accept the offer by tomorrow evening, or face the consequences of remaining in your current exposed position without additional protection. As the voice falls silent and footsteps retreat from the other side of the confessional, you remain kneeling in the booth, genuinely praying for the first time in years and wondering whether you're being offered salvation or damnation. It's a sophisticated distinction that cuts to the heart of your dilemma. Are you being offered a better position with a more powerful patron, or are you being asked to betray fundamental loyalties for temporary advantage? And how does one distinguish between changing sides and changing loyalties, you ask? Changing sides preserves your essential relationships while seeking better terms. Changing loyalties abandons your essential relationships for completely new ones. The first is business. The second is betrayal. Machiavelli's analysis provides a framework for evaluating the mysterious offer, but it also reveals the fundamental problem. You don't know enough about your potential new patron to determine whether accepting would constitute changing sides or changing loyalties. Your conversation is interrupted by the approach of a group of armed men wearing Medici colors. They're trying to appear casual, but their formation and movement patterns suggest they're conducting surveillance rather than simply patrolling the area. It appears that your career considerations have attracted official attention, Machiavelli observes dryly. Perhaps this conversation should continue at another time in a more private setting. You agree and part company, but not before Machiavelli offers a final piece of advice. Remember that in times of crisis, the most dangerous position is often the middle ground. Choose quickly and commit completely, or risk being destroyed by both sides. As you walk away from the river, you realize that your options are narrowing rapidly. The surveillance suggests that Lorenzo is either protecting you or preparing to eliminate you as a security risk. The deadline from your mysterious contact suggests that indecision is being interpreted as rejection. And Machiavelli's advice suggests that trying to maintain neutrality could be fatal. By evening, you've reached a decision that feels both inevitable and terrifying. You're going to accept the mysterious patron's offer, not because you trust him, but because remaining in your current position appears even more dangerous than taking the unknown risk. The question now is whether you can manage the transition without triggering the kind of violent response that historically accompanies jester betrayals in times of political crisis. Your decision to accept the mysterious patron's offer requires careful planning to avoid the violent consequences that usually follow jester defections during political crises. Simply disappearing would alert Lorenzo to your betrayal and probably trigger a manhunt. Openly announcing your departure would give him opportunity to prevent it through imprisonment or worse. The solution requires a more subtle approach that creates plausible deniability. While establishing your new allegiances, you begin by sending carefully crafted messages to various contacts throughout Florence, spreading the impression that you're considering a pilgrimage to Rome for spiritual reasons related to the current political turmoil. The cover story provides explanation for your absence, while suggesting religious motivation rather than political betrayal. The monastery of San Marco, with its connections to both religious and secular authorities, provides the perfect setting for creating your false trail. You arrange to meet with Brother Alessandro, a Dominican friar who serves as unofficial liaison between the monastery and various noble houses, including the Medici. Brother Alessandro, you explained during your visit, I find myself troubled by the moral complexities of serving worldly masters during times when Christian princes war against each other. Perhaps withdrawal from court life would allow for spiritual reflection and renewal. The friar, an intelligent man who understands the political subtexts of such conversations, nods sympathetically. Many servants of princes find their consciences tested by the demands of secular loyalty. The monastery has often provided sanctuary for those seeking to reconcile their earthly duties with their spiritual obligations. It's exactly the kind of conversation that would be reported to Lorenzo if he inquires about your whereabouts, providing explanation for your absence while suggesting personal crisis rather than political betrayal. The beauty of religious motivation is that it's both plausible and difficult to challenge without appearing impious. Your next step involves creating evidence of your spiritual journey, while actually preparing for your transition to the new patron. You purchase pilgrim supplies and travel documents, arrange for forwarding of any messages to religious houses along the route to Rome, and make public appearances at various churches seeking blessings for your journey. The performance requires convincing multiple audiences simultaneously. Lorenzo's agents must believe you're having a genuine spiritual crisis. Potential enemies must see evidence of your vulnerability during travel. And your mysterious new patron must receive confirmation that you're prepared to complete the agreed transition. The final element of your deception involves a clandestine meeting with your new contact to receive specific instructions for making the transition. The meeting location, a wine merchant shop near the Oltrano, provides perfect cover for what appears to be a chance encounter between customer and proprietor. "Welcome, friend," greets the merchant, a man whose sophisticated manner doesn't quite match his modest commercial setting. "I believe you're interested in wines suitable for a long journey." "Indeed," you reply, playing your role in the charade. "I require something that will provide comfort during an extended pilgrimage, but also something that might serve as gifts for generous hosts along the way." The conversation continues for several minutes, ostensibly about wine selection, but actually covering the details of your extraction from Florence and integration into your new patron's household. You learn that you'll be traveling not to Rome, but to Urbino, where Duke Francesco Maria della Rovere requires someone with your specific talents for dealing with the crisis in papal politics. The revelation of your new patron's identity changes everything about your situation. Della Rovere is Lorenzo's enemy, currently fighting papal forces for control of Urbino, and recently excommunicated by Pope Leo X. Accepting service with him doesn't just mean changing employers. It means becoming an enemy of Florence and potentially of the church itself. But it's too late to reconsider. Your deception is already in motion. Your spiritual crisis is already public knowledge, and any attempt to withdraw would expose you to retaliation from both sides. You're committed to a course of action that will either establish you as a valuable asset to a powerful patron or destroy you completely if the gamble fails. The wines you've selected are excellent choices, the merchant concludes, providing you with written instructions disguised as merchant correspondence. I'm confident they'll serve your purposes admirably during your journey. As you leave the shop with your package of wine and coded instructions, you realize that you've just committed the kind of betrayal that historically results in jesters being found dead in rivers or disappearing permanently from historical records. The next few days will determine whether you've made a brilliant, strategic move or signed your own death warrant. Your departure from Florence must appear routine to casual observers, while actually constituting the most dangerous journey of your life. The coded instructions from your new patron specify a route that avoids main roads where Lorenzo's agents might intercept you, while also providing cover stories for various checkpoints where your travel documents might be examined. The morning of your departure arrives gray and rainy, providing natural camouflage for unusual activities, while also reflecting your internal state of anxiety about the risks you're taking. You make final preparations in your lodgings, packing only essential items while leaving behind anything that might suggest permanent departure rather than temporary pilgrimage. Your landlord Giuseppe appears genuinely concerned about your spiritual journey, offering practical advice about travel conditions and letters of introduction to innkeepers along the route to Rome. His solicitude would be touching if it weren't based on complete deception about your actual destination and motivations. Take care of yourself, Marco, he says with paternal warmth. The roads are dangerous these days, with all the political turmoil. Stick to the main routes, travel with other pilgrims when possible, and don't trust strangers too readily. The irony of receiving warnings about trusting strangers while actively betraying everyone who trusts you is not lost on you. But the guilt is a luxury you can't afford until you're safely established in your new position. Your route out of Florence takes you past several landmarks that have defined your years in the city. The Palazzo Vecchio, where you've performed countless times. The churches where you've sought both genuine and pretended spiritual guidance. The markets where you've gathered intelligence disguised as casual conversation. Leaving feels like abandoning not just a job, but an entire identity. The first checkpoint comes at the city gates, where guards examine travel documents and question departing travelers about their destinations and purposes. Your pilgrim credentials and religious motivation pass inspection without difficulty, but you notice that the guards are paying closer attention to travelers than usual, suggesting heightened security due to the political crisis. Safe travels, brother, one guard wishes you as he returns your documents. May your pilgrimage bring you the spiritual peace you seek. The blessing would be more meaningful if you were actually seeking spiritual peace rather than political survival, but you accept it gracefully and continue on your way toward what you hope will be safety rather than destruction. The road to Urbino, disguised as the road to Rome through a circuitous route designed to confuse potential pursuers, takes you through some of the most beautiful countryside in Italy. Rolling hills covered with vineyards and olive groves, medieval towns perched on hilltops, Roman ruins that remind you of the impermanence of all political arrangements. Under different circumstances, the journey would be genuinely pleasant, rather than terrifying. Your first overnight stop is at a monastery outside Arezzo, where your pilgrim identity provides both lodging and protection from secular authorities who might be searching for missing jesters. The monks who provide hospitality are genuinely holy men whose concerns focus on spiritual rather than political matters, making them ideal unwitting accomplices for your deception. Brother Marco, asked the guest master over the simple evening meal, what spiritual concerns drive you toward Rome at such a dangerous time? Father, you reply with partially genuine emotion, I find that serving worldly masters has complicated my relationship with God. Perhaps distance from temporal concerns will clarify my understanding of eternal truths. It's not entirely false. Your years as a court jester have indeed complicated your relationship with truth, morality, and spiritual values. The difference is that you're seeking political rather than religious solutions to these complications. The conversation with the monks continues through the evening, touching on themes of loyalty, betrayal, moral compromise, and spiritual redemption that feel more relevant to your situation than any of them realize. By the time you retire to the guest cell, you're wondering whether your cover story might be becoming your actual motivation. But morning brings practical concerns that override philosophical reflections. You must reach Urbino within the time frame specified in your instructions. Establish your credibility with Duke Francesco Maria, and begin the work of proving your value to a patron whose political situation is even more precarious than Lorenzo's. The final stage of your journey takes you through territory where papal and ducal forces have been skirmishing, making travel genuinely dangerous in ways that have nothing to do with your personal betrayal of the Medici. By the time Urbino's distinctive skyline appears on the horizon, you're exhausted, anxious, and uncertain whether you're approaching salvation or damnation. The ducal palace of Urbino rises from its hillside setting like a vision of Renaissance. Perfection, its elegant facade and harmonious proportions, representing the humanist ideal of beauty serving power. But as your horse climbs the winding road toward the palace gates, you're acutely aware that this architectural masterpiece currently houses one of the most embattled rulers in Italy. Francesco Maria della Rovere, Duke of Urbino, has been excommunicated by Pope Leo X, stripped of his papal vicariate, and faces military pressure from forces loyal to the Church. His need for intelligence about papal intentions and potential allies makes someone with your background potentially valuable, but it also makes his court a dangerous place for anyone suspected of divided loyalties. The guards at the palace gates examine your travel documents with professional thoroughness, paying particular attention to the coded merchant correspondence that serves as your introduction to the Duke's service. After what feels like an eternity of waiting in the courtyard while your credentials are verified, you're escorted into the palace by a chamberlain whose manner suggests cautious interest rather than enthusiasm. His Excellency is aware of your arrival, the chamberlain explains as he leads you through corridors lined with classical sculptures and Renaissance paintings. But current circumstances require careful evaluation of all new additions to the household. You'll be quartered in the servants' wing until your suitability for court service can be assessed. It's a polite way of saying that you're essentially under house arrest until they determine whether you're a valuable asset or a dangerous liability. The arrangement is prudent from their perspective, but nerve-wracking from yours, since your safety depends entirely on convincing them of your value before they decide. You might be a security risk. Your quarters are comfortable but isolated. A small apartment in a wing of the palace reserved for household staff, with limited access to other areas and constant awareness that your movements are being monitored. The isolation provides time for reflection on the magnitude of the gamble you've taken, but it also increases anxiety about whether you've made a fatal miscalculation. The waiting period gives you opportunity to observe the palace atmosphere and gauge the Duke's political situation through the behavior of his household. The staff moves with the nervous efficiency of people working for an embattled master whose future is uncertain. Conversations are conducted in whispers, visitors are scrutinized carefully, and there's a general sense that everyone is preparing for siege conditions. Your first substantive contact with ducal authority comes not from the Duke himself, but from his secretary, a lean Florentine exile named Alessandro Strozzi, whose family has its own complicated history with the Medici. The meeting takes place in a small office, furnished with maps, correspondence, and the kind of intelligence materials that reveal the scope of Urbino's current challenges. Marco Benedetti. Strozzi begins without preamble, or should I say Giovanni. Torriani of Mantua? Yes, we know your real name and background. The question is whether your decision to leave Medici service represents genuine conversion to our cause, or simply opportunistic pursuit of better terms. The revelation that they've investigated your background thoroughly is both reassuring and frightening. reassuring because it suggests professional competence in evaluating potential assets, frightening because it demonstrates the resources and connections needed to penetrate your carefully constructed jester identity. Messer Alessandro, you reply carefully. I left Medici service because I recognized that Florence's alliance calculations were changing in ways that would make my position untenable. I came to Urbino because I believe Duke Francesco Maria represents the best hope for maintaining Italian independence against foreign intervention. It's a calculated answer that presents your defection as principal political choice rather than mere opportunism, while also demonstrating knowledge of the broader strategic situation that makes your intelligence potentially valuable. Strozzi studies you with the sharp gaze of someone whose survival has depended on accurately reading people's motivations. Perhaps, he says finally, but principle is a luxury that few can afford in our current circumstances. What matters is whether you can provide services that justify the risks of accepting a potential spy into our household. The conversation continues for another hour, during which Strozzi probes your knowledge of Florentine politics, papal intentions, and the various alliance negotiations currently reshaping Italian political arrangements. Your answers reveal the extent of your access to sensitive information, while also demonstrating your analytical capabilities and strategic understanding. By the end of the interview, you sense that you've passed the initial evaluation, but you also understand that your real test will come when you're actually required to perform the intelligence and advisory functions that justify your presence in an embattled court. You'll meet with His Excellency tomorrow morning, Strozzi concludes. Prepare material that demonstrates your unique value as both entertainer and intelligence analyst. Your future here depends on convincing him that a Florentine jester is worth the political risks of harboring. The Duke's private study reflects both the refined tastes of a Renaissance prince and the practical concerns of a military commander facing existential threats. Classical manuscripts share shelf space with detailed maps of papal territories. Elegant artworks hang beside strategic assessments of enemy troop movements, and the morning light streaming through tall windows illuminates both philosophical texts and intelligence reports that Francesco Maria della Rovere himself embodies. The same combination of intellectual sophistication and military pragmatism that characterizes his environment. At 37, he's experienced enough to understand political complexity, but young enough to take decisive action when circumstances require it. His greeting is cordial but reserved, the manner of someone who appreciates talent but can't afford to trust easily. Marco, he begins, using your professional name rather than your real identity. Alessandro tells me you've brought us both entertainment value and practical intelligence capabilities. In our current situation, we need both, but we need them from someone whose loyalty is absolute and whose discretion is perfect. It's a direct statement of expectations that makes clear your position depends entirely on proving indispensable, while avoiding any hint of divided loyalty. The challenge is demonstrating your value without revealing information that might make you seem dangerous if you were to defect again. Your Excellency, you reply with a formal bow. I come to your service because I believe Urbino represents the best hope for preserving Italian independence and Christian values against the corruption that has infected both secular and religious authorities elsewhere. It's a calculated statement that positions your defection as principal choice, while also flattering the Duke's sense of his own righteousness in opposing papal authority. The key is balancing sincerity with strategic positioning. A noble sentiment. The Duke responds with subtle irony, but sentiment alone won't help us survive the next few months. What specific capabilities do you bring to our service? And what information do you possess that might influence our strategic decisions? The question forces you to reveal enough valuable intelligence to justify your presence while holding back. Enough to ensure continued usefulness. It's the kind of delicate balance that defines jester. Survival in Political Crises. You spend the next hour providing detailed analysis of Florentine political dynamics, Medici alliance calculations, and the intelligence you gathered about various nobles' attitudes toward the current papal-ducal conflict. Your information includes insights about potential weaknesses in the coalition opposing Urbino, opportunities for diplomatic intervention, and assessment of various Italian princes' reliability as potential allies. Particularly interesting, the Duke notes, is your assessment of Alfonso d'Este's flexibility regarding alliance commitments. If Ferrara could be convinced to remain neutral rather than supporting papal forces, our strategic position would improve significantly. It's exactly the kind of practical application of intelligence that demonstrates your value while also creating opportunities for expanded responsibilities that could secure your position permanently. Your Excellency, you respond, my experience suggests that the Duke of Ferrara responds well to approaches that respect his intellectual sophistication while addressing his practical concerns about Ferrari's independence. A diplomatic initiative that emphasizes mutual benefits rather than subordination might prove successful. The conversation evolves into a comprehensive discussion of diplomatic strategy, alliance politics, and intelligence requirements that reveals the Duke's own sophisticated understanding of the strategic situation. By the end of the meeting, you sense that you've passed the crucial test of demonstrating useful knowledge and analytical capability. Very well, Marco, the Duke concludes. You'll join our household officially as court entertainer, but your real function will be intelligence analysis and diplomatic consultation. Alessandro will brief you on our current intelligence requirements and operational priorities. It's the confirmation you've been hoping for, official acceptance into the Duke's service with responsibilities that justify your continued existence. But it's also the beginning of a new phase of risk, since your survival now depends on successfully navigating the complex politics of a court under siege, while maintaining the trust of a patron whose own survival is far from guaranteed. As you leave the Duke's study, you realize that you've traded one set of existential risks for another, but at least you've bought yourself time to prove your worth and establish your indispensability to a patron who might be more reliable than the Medici, assuming he survives the current crisis. Your integration into the Duke's intelligence apparatus reveals the sophisticated information networks that keep small Italian states competitive with much larger powers. Urbino's survival depends not on military strength, which it lacks compared to papal forces, but on superior intelligence, strategic flexibility, and the ability to anticipate and counter enemy initiatives before they can be implemented effectively. Alessandro Strozzi proves to be an excellent mentor in the practical aspects of intelligence work, sharing techniques developed during his own exile from Florence and refined through years of service to embattled masters. Your first lesson involves understanding the difference between information gathering, which any competent spy can accomplish, and intelligence analysis, which requires the kind of strategic thinking that makes advisors indispensable. Raw information is dangerous, Strozzi explains during one of your private briefings, because it can be misinterpreted or used to support predetermined conclusions. Intelligence analysis provides context, evaluates reliability, and identifies implications that might not be obvious to people without specialized knowledge. The distinction becomes crucial as you begin processing the constant stream of reports that flow into Urbino from agents throughout Italy, papal troop movements, Venetian diplomatic initiatives, French political calculations, imperial responses to Italian developments. Each piece of information must be evaluated for accuracy, significance, and strategic implications. Your background as a court jester proves unexpectedly valuable in this work, since your years of observing and analyzing human behavior for entertainment purposes translate directly into assessing the motivations and likely actions of political figures. The same skills that allowed you to craft effective comedy now enable you to predict diplomatic behavior and military decisions. Your first major analytical success involves identifying a pattern in papal diplomatic communications that suggests an imminent shift in strategy regarding the Urbino conflict. By cross-referencing multiple intelligence reports and applying your understanding of papal personality dynamics, you're able to predict that Pope Leo X is preparing to offer negotiated settlement rather than pursuing military resolution. Your analysis suggests that His Holiness is more concerned about French intervention than about punishing our resistance. You report to the Duke during a morning intelligence briefing. If we respond to negotiation overtures with apparent willingness to discuss terms while actually stalling for time, we might benefit from changes in the broader strategic situation. It's exactly the kind of practical strategic advice that justifies your presence and demonstrates your value as more than just a defected entertainer. The Duke's acceptance of your analysis and incorporation of your recommendations into his diplomatic strategy provides confirmation that you've successfully established yourself as a trusted advisor. But success also brings new risks, since your growing influence makes you a more attractive target for enemy intelligence operations designed to neutralize Urbino's analytical capabilities. You begin noticing signs of surveillance, strangers who appear too frequently in your vicinity, conversations that stop when you approach, small disturbances in your quarters that suggest someone has been searching your possessions. The paranoia might be justified, or it might be the psychological effect of living under constant pressure in a court, where everyone's survival depends on successful deception and counter-deception. Either way, it requires developing new security practices and maintaining constant vigilance about who might be watching your activities and reporting on your behavior. Your position becomes more complex when you're assigned to accompany a diplomatic mission to Bologna, where Urbino is attempting to negotiate support from Giovanni II Bentivoglio, whose family has its own complicated relationship with papal authority. The mission provides opportunity to demonstrate your diplomatic skills, while also exposing you to the dangerous world of interstate negotiations, where a single mistake can have fatal consequences. Remember, Strozzi advises as you prepare for departure. Your role is to observe, assess, and advise, but never to commit our master to courses of action without explicit authorization. Diplomatic missions often develop their own momentum, and it's easy to make promises that seem reasonable in the moment, but prove disastrous when examined in broader context. The advice proves prescient as the Bologna negotiations reveal the complex web of competing interests, secret commitments, and hidden agendas that make Italian diplomacy so treacherous for the unprepared. Bologna in 1516 represents everything that makes Italian politics simultaneously fascinating and deadly. A city nominally independent but actually controlled by competing factions, officially loyal to the Pope but secretly negotiating with his enemies, wealthy enough to influence regional politics but not powerful enough to guarantee its own survival. Giovanni II Bentivoglio receives your diplomatic mission in the Palazzo del Podesta, a setting chosen to emphasize his civic authority while avoiding the religious implications of meeting in ecclesiastical buildings. The choice reveals political sophistication. Bentivoglio understands that symbolism matters in diplomatic negotiations, and he's carefully managing the visual message of his willingness to deal with an excommunicated duke. Your role in the mission is officially that of cultural attache, providing entertainment and intellectual discourse to create a relaxed atmosphere for serious negotiations. But your real function is intelligence gathering and behavioral analysis. Observing Bentivoglio's reactions, assessing his sincerity, and identifying potential leverage points that might influence his decision-making. The Bolognese ruler proves to be a shrewd negotiator whose affable manner conceals calculating intelligence and deep understanding of regional power dynamics. His initial presentation emphasizes Bologna's vulnerability to papal retaliation and the risks of supporting Urbino too openly, but you notice subtle signals suggesting greater willingness to cooperate than his words indicate. Your Excellency understands, Bentivoglio explains to the Duke's representative, that Bologna's position requires careful balance between various competing interests. We value our friendship with Urbino, but we must also consider our relationships with other regional powers. It's diplomatic language for, we want to help you, but need something in return that justifies the risks. And your job is to identify what kind of incentives might tip the balance toward active support rather than continued neutrality. During the evening entertainment that follows formal negotiations, you perform material specifically designed to gauge Bentivoglio's attitudes toward papal authority, French intervention, and potential alliance arrangements. Your jokes about ecclesiastical corruption generate genuine laughter, suggesting sympathy for Urbino's position. References to foreign dominance produce more restrained responses, indicating concern about imperial or French control over Italian affairs. Most revealing is Bentivoglio's reaction to humor about the reliability of political commitments. His laughter carries an edge of bitterness that suggests personal experience with betrayal, probably referring to the complex history of Bentivoglio. Relations with various popes and their changing attitudes toward Bologna's independence. After the public entertainment concludes, Bentivoglio requests a private conversation that reveals the real purpose of the diplomatic mission. Bologna is indeed willing to support Urbino, but the price is higher than initially expected, and the conditions more complex than simple military alliance. Francesco Maria's resistance to papal authority serves Bologna's interests. Bentivoglio explains in the privacy of his study, but it also creates opportunities for our enemies to portray us as rebels against Christian authority. We need assurance that Urbino's ultimate goal is accommodation with legitimate papal authority, rather than permanent separation from church hierarchy. It's a sophisticated distinction that reveals Bentivoglio's understanding of the long-term implications of the current conflict. It recognizes that temporary resistance to a particular pope's policies might be politically acceptable, but permanent. Rebellion against papal authority would make Bologna a target for future church campaigns regardless of who occupies the papacy. Your assessment of the conversation suggests that Bologna's support is available, but conditional on Urbino's willingness to present its resistance as defense of traditional rights, rather than revolutionary challenge to ecclesiastical authority. The distinction might seem subtle, but it could determine whether the conflict ends in negotiated settlement or permanent excommunication. Your Excellency's wisdom in distinguishing between resistance to abuse and rebellion against authority reflects the kind of sophisticated thinking that Italian independence requires. You respond carefully, testing his receptivity to the conceptual framework that might make alliance possible. The negotiation continues through several more private sessions, during which you serve as informal mediator between the formal diplomatic positions and the practical requirements for successful cooperation. Your unique position as someone outside traditional diplomatic hierarchy allows you to explore possibilities that might be difficult for official representatives to discuss directly. By the end of the mission, you've helped establish the foundation for an alliance that could significantly improve Urbino's strategic position, while also demonstrating your value as both intelligence analyst and diplomatic facilitator. But you've also learned that Italian politics operates through networks of personal relationships and secret commitments that make every agreement potentially vulnerable to changing circumstances. Your return to Urbino coincides with the arrival of disturbing intelligence that transforms your successful diplomatic mission into potential disaster. Lorenzo de' Medici has discovered your defection and is actively working to discredit you. with potential allies while also seeking opportunities for direct retaliation against both you and your new patron. The information comes from one of Urbino's agents in Florence, who reports that Lorenzo is spreading rumors about your unreliability, claiming that your defection demonstrates fundamental character flaws that make you untrustworthy as an advisor or intelligence source. More dangerously, he's also providing detailed information about your background and capabilities to anyone willing to use that knowledge against Urbino. The implications are severe, Alessandro Strozzi explains during an emergency briefing with the Duke. Lorenzo's campaign against Marco isn't just personal vendetta. It's strategic warfare designed to undermine our intelligence capabilities and diplomatic credibility. The revelation forces you to confront the reality that your betrayal of the Medici has consequences extending far beyond your personal safety. Your presence in Urbino now represents a liability that could compromise the Duke's broader political objectives, making your continued service potentially counterproductive despite your demonstrated value. Duke, Francesco Maria's response reveals the pragmatic calculation that governs political survival in Renaissance Italy. Marco's intelligence contributions have been valuable, he acknowledges, but if his presence creates more problems than his analysis solves, we need to reassess our arrangement. It's a coldly rational approach that you can't fault, even as it threatens your newly established security. The Duke's primary obligation is to Urbino's survival, and protecting a defected jester who's become a political liability would be poor strategic judgment. But the situation becomes more complex when additional intelligence reveals that Lorenzo's campaign against you is part of a broader offensive designed to isolate Urbino diplomatically and undermine the alliance network that provides the duchy's primary defense against papal pressure. Your personal betrayal has become a weapon in a larger political war. If we simply dismiss Marco to appease Medici anger, Strozzi argues, we signal weakness and invite further pressure against our other diplomatic initiatives. But if we retain him despite Lorenzo's campaign, we risk alienating potential allies who might view protection of a defector as unreliable behavior. The debate over your fate continues for several days, during which you're essentially confined to quarters, while the Duke's advisors evaluate options for managing the crisis your presence has created. The isolation provides time for reflection on the unintended consequences of your survival strategy and the ways that individual betrayals can escalate into broader political conflicts. Your situation improves when intelligence arrives suggesting that Lorenzo's campaign against you has backfired by making him appear petty and vindictive to other Italian rulers. Several princes who might otherwise support Florentine initiatives have interpreted the personal vendetta as evidence of poor political judgment, creating opportunities for Urbino to exploit Medici diplomatic mistakes. Lorenzo's obsession with personal revenge has damaged his credibility as a political negotiator. You observed during a strategy session with the Duke's advisors. We might be able to turn his campaign against me into evidence of Florence's unreliability as an alliance partner. It's a sophisticated analysis that demonstrates your continued value while also providing a framework for transforming your liability into a strategic asset. If Urbino can present Lorenzo's behavior as typical Medici treachery, other princes might become more receptive to alternatives that don't involve trusting Florentine commitments. The Duke's decision to retain your services while actively exploiting Lorenzo's mistakes represents a calculated gamble that your intelligence value outweighs the diplomatic risks of protecting a notorious defector. But it also commits Urbino to a more aggressive approach to the broader political conflict, using your situation as a weapon against Medici credibility. Marco, the Duke concludes, your betrayal of the Medici has inadvertently provided us with strategic opportunities that might justify the risks of your continued presence. But your survival now depends on successfully exploiting those opportunities. Before Lorenzo's campaign succeeds in isolating us completely, it's a reprieve that comes with increased responsibility and heightened danger, since your value now depends on actively damaging your former patron, rather than simply providing intelligence about his activities. The decision to transform your defection from liability into strategic weapon requires careful orchestration of a propaganda campaign designed to exploit Lorenzo's mistakes while positioning Urbino as a reliable alternative to Medici alliance offers. Your unique knowledge of Florentine internal politics provides crucial intelligence for crafting messages that will resonate with target audiences throughout Italy. The campaign begins with subtle, diplomatic communications that highlight the contrast between Lorenzo's vindictive pursuit of personal revenge and Francesco Maria's principled defense of Italian independence. Your former patron's obsession with a defected jester becomes evidence of misplaced priorities and poor political judgment. That makes him unreliable as an alliance partner. A prince who cannot control his emotions regarding personal slights, one carefully crafted message suggests, might prove equally unreliable when alliance commitments conflict with emotional impulses. The observation is designed to plant doubts about Florentine diplomatic reliability while presenting Urbino as a more mature and trustworthy partner for serious political cooperation. Your insider knowledge of Lorenzo's personality weaknesses provides the foundation for psychological warfare that would be impossible without your defection. Your role in the counteroffensive involves drafting analysis papers that appear to be objective intelligence assessments, but actually serve as sophisticated propaganda designed to influence other courts' perceptions of the current political situation. The documents combine genuine insights about regional politics with subtle arguments for supporting Urbino against papal pressure. The most effective pieces focus on the broader implications of the current conflict for Italian independence and Christian unity. By presenting Francesco Maria's resistance as principled defense of traditional rights, rather than rebellion against legitimate authority, you help create a narrative framework that makes supporting Urbino seem like patriotic duty rather than dangerous defiance. The current conflict, you write in one assessment, represents a fundamental choice between Italian self-governance and foreign domination, disguised as ecclesiastical reform. The outcome will determine whether Italian princes retain the independence necessary for effective defense against imperial and French intervention. It's sophisticated political analysis that happens to support Urbino's position while appearing to be dispassionate evaluation of strategic realities. The key to effective propaganda is ensuring that your arguments are both logically compelling and emotionally resonant with target audiences. Your counteroffensive achieves its first major success when Giovanni II Beneviglio publicly announces Bologna's support for Urbino, citing concerns about the precedent that unchallenged papal aggression might establish for other Italian rulers. The announcement represents validation of your diplomatic work and evidence that the propaganda campaign is influencing decision-making at the highest levels. But success also brings escalation from your opponents, as Lorenzo responds to Bologna's announcement by intensifying his campaign against you personally and attempting to discredit Urbino's diplomatic initiatives through more aggressive intelligence operations. The conflict that began as personal vendetta is evolving into systematic political warfare with implications extending far beyond individual survival. Marco's defection has become a symbol, Alessandro Strozzi observes during a strategy meeting, representing the broader question of whether Italian princes will submit to external pressure or maintain their independence through mutual cooperation. The symbolic dimension of your situation creates both opportunities and dangers that extend far beyond your personal fate. Success in exploiting the propaganda opportunities could establish you as a valuable long-term asset whose continued service justifies significant investment. failure could result in your elimination as part of a broader diplomatic compromise designed to end the conflict. Your survival increasingly depends on the success of political strategies that you've helped design but can't directly control, making you simultaneously more valuable and more vulnerable than ever before in your career as a professional survivor. The escalating conflict between Urbino and Florence, with your defection serving as both catalyst and symbol, eventually attracts the direct attention of Pope Leo X, whose initial focus on punishing Francesco Maria's rebellion expands to include concern about the broader implications of Italian princely resistance to papal authority. The papal response begins with diplomatic pressure on Bologna to reconsider its support for Urbino, combined with economic incentives designed to make continued alliance with an excommunicated duke financially costly. But when these measures fail to achieve immediate results, the Vatican begins preparing more aggressive options that could transform the regional conflict into a broader war. Your intelligence sources within the papal bureaucracy, developed through careful cultivation of disaffected clerics and ambitious administrators, provide advance warning of the escalation while also revealing the internal debates that shape papal policy. The information suggests that Leo X is torn between his desire to punish Francesco Maria's defiance and his concern about the precedent that successful resistance might establish for other Italian rulers. His Holiness faces a fundamental strategic dilemma. You report during a crucial intelligence briefing. Military victory against Urbino would demonstrate papal power, but might also provoke broader Italian resistance to ecclesiastical authority. Negotiated settlement would preserve church unity, but might encourage other princes to test papal resolve through similar challenges. Your analysis helps the Duke understand that his resistance has created strategic opportunities that extend beyond immediate survival to influence the broader balance between secular and religious authority in Italian politics. The implications suggest that successful negotiation might achieve objectives that military victory alone could never accomplish. But the papal response also includes direct pressure on you personally, as church agents begin spreading counter-propaganda that portrays your defection as evidence of moral corruption and fundamental untrustworthiness. The campaign is designed to neutralize your effectiveness as a political symbol while also undermining confidence in intelligence analysis that comes from such a questionable source. The Vatican's campaign against Marco, Strozzi observes, represents sophisticated psychological warfare designed to destroy his credibility, while avoiding direct acknowledgement of his political importance. The papal strategy reveals both the threat you represent to their broader objectives and the difficulty of responding to unconventional political warfare that operates through propaganda and symbol manipulation rather than traditional military or diplomatic pressure. Your response involves crafting material that turns the papal attack against you into evidence of their desperation and moral bankruptcy. If the Vatican needs to destroy a mere jester to achieve their political objectives, what does that suggest about the weakness of their position and the illegitimacy of their claims? A church that fears the wit of a court entertainer, you write, in one particularly effective piece, might lack the spiritual authority necessary for governing Christian princes. The counterattack exploits the fundamental contradiction in the papal position. They're simultaneously claiming that you're too insignificant to deserve serious attention and too dangerous to be allowed to continue your activities. The logical inconsistency provides opportunities for ridicule that undermine their credibility, while reinforcing your own symbolic importance through the exchange of propaganda. Attacks escalates throughout the summer of 1516, creating a complex information war that parallels and sometimes overshadows the military and diplomatic conflict that originally prompted your defection. Your personal survival has become intertwined with broader questions about political authority, religious legitimacy, and Italian independence that will influence European politics for decades. The strategic situation transforms dramatically when news arrives that King Francis I of France is preparing a major military intervention in Italian affairs, potentially shifting the balance of power in ways that could make the current papal ducal conflict irrelevant compared to the threat of foreign domination. The French intervention creates both opportunities and dangers for all parties to the current conflict. Urbino might benefit from papal distraction with larger threats, but French success could also eliminate the independent Italian political structure that makes small duchies viable. The Vatican might welcome French support against rebellious princes, but French dominance could also undermine papal authority in Italian affairs. Your intelligence analysis of the French situation reveals the complexity of the strategic calculations that all parties must now consider. King Francis seeks Italian allies against imperial power. You report, but his ultimate objective is French hegemony over the peninsula, which would eliminate the independence that all Italian princes currently enjoy. The assessment provides crucial context for evaluating potential alliance options and negotiation strategies. If the immediate papal-ducal conflict continues, both sides risk weakening themselves before the French intervention that threatens everyone's long-term interests. Duke Francesco Maria's response demonstrates the strategic flexibility that has kept Urbino independent despite pressure from much larger powers. Rather than viewing the French intervention as simply another threat, he begins exploring possibilities for using the changed strategic situation to achieve objectives that were impossible under previous circumstances. The French threat creates incentives for accommodation between all Italian parties, he observes during a crucial strategy session. If we can present reasonable terms for ending our conflict with the Vatican, we might achieve our essential objectives while positioning ourselves as valuable allies against foreign intervention. Your role in developing these negotiation strategies involves crafting proposals that provide face-saving opportunities for all parties, while also advancing Urbino's long-term interests. The challenge is designing agreements that resolve the immediate conflict without creating precedents that might encourage future papal aggression against other Italian princes. The breakthrough comes when you suggest framing the negotiation as a mutual defense agreement against foreign intervention rather than a simple submission to papal authority. The conceptual approach allows Francesco Maria to end his resistance without acknowledging wrongdoing, while also providing Leo X with the practical cooperation he needs without forcing him to admit that his original policies were mistaken. Your Excellency's proposal for mutual cooperation against foreign threats you draft in one negotiation document recognizes that Christian unity requires voluntary association rather than coercive subordination. The language provides a framework for agreement that satisfies both parties' essential requirements, while avoiding the symbolic humiliation that would make future cooperation impossible. Your diplomatic skills, developed through years of navigating the treacherous world of court entertainment, prove directly applicable to the challenge of resolving apparently irreconcilable political conflicts. The success of your negotiation framework establishes your reputation as someone capable of creative problem-solving under pressure, but it also raises expectations that your future contributions will achieve similarly impressive results. The pressure of increased expectations creates new forms of professional stress that are different from, but potentially as dangerous as, the direct threats you've previously faced. The complex negotiations that follow your diplomatic breakthrough reveal the intricate choreography required to resolve high-stakes political conflicts without destroying the dignity and future prospects of any major participant. Every phrase must be calibrated to provide multiple interpretations that allow different audiences to understand the agreement in terms that support their preferred narratives. Your role in these negotiations evolves from intelligence analyst to diplomatic facilitator helping to bridge conceptual gaps between positions that appear irreconcilable, but actually reflect different approaches to achieving compatible objectives. The Vatican wants acknowledgement of papal authority and cooperation in defending Christian interests. Urbino wants preservation of ducal independence and recognition of legitimate rights. Both sides want protection against French intervention that threatens everyone's long-term interests. The negotiation process itself becomes a masterclass in Renaissance diplomacy, with multiple layers of public and private communication designed to create momentum toward agreement, while maintaining flexibility for all parties if circumstances change. Official diplomatic exchanges provide formal frameworks, while informal conversations through intermediaries explore possibilities that couldn't be discussed in official settings. Your contribution involves crafting language that transforms the conflict from a zero-sum competition for dominance into a positive-sum cooperation for mutual benefit. Instead of debating whether Francesco Maria was right or wrong to resist papal pressure, the negotiations focus on how ducal cooperation can strengthen papal authority against French challenges. His Excellency's experience in defending Italian independence reads one key passage you helped develop, provides valuable insights for coordinating Christian resistance to foreign intervention. The formulation presents Francesco Maria's rebellion as preparation for cooperation rather than evidence of disloyalty, allowing both sides to interpret his actions in ways that support the current negotiation rather than undermining it. The most delicate aspect of the negotiations involves developing formulas for Francesco Maria's return to papal favor without requiring explicit admission of wrongdoing or submission to humiliating conditions. The solution involves ceremonial gestures that can be interpreted as either acknowledgement of papal authority or mutual recognition of shared Christian responsibilities. Your theatrical background proves invaluable in designing ceremonies that provide impressive visual symbolism while avoiding substantive commitments that either side would find unacceptable. The final reconciliation ceremony combines elements of submission, cooperation, and mutual respect in proportions that allow both sides to claim victory. The negotiations conclude successfully in October 1516, with an agreement that restores Francesco Maria to papal favor while preserving ducal independence and establishing frameworks for cooperation against French intervention. The settlement achieves all essential objectives for both sides while also creating precedents that might prevent similar conflicts in the future. Your contribution to the negotiated settlement establishes your reputation as a diplomatic innovator, whose unconventional background provides unique insights into political problem-solving. But success also creates new expectations and responsibilities that will shape your future career in ways that are both promising and potentially dangerous. Marco, the Duke tells you following the successful conclusion of negotiations, your service has exceeded every expectation. But our success has also attracted attention that could make your continued presence here either a tremendous asset or a significant liability, depending on how we manage your growing reputation. It's a sophisticated assessment that recognizes both the opportunities and risks created by your diplomatic success. Fame can provide protection and open new possibilities, but it can also make you a target for people who prefer their political advisors to remain anonymous and unthreatening. Your challenge now is leveraging your success to achieve long-term security while avoiding the overconfidence that destroys advisors, who mistake temporary usefulness for permanent indispensability. The successful resolution of the papal-ducal conflict establishes your reputation throughout Italy as a political innovator whose unique combination of intelligence, creativity, and diplomatic skill makes you potentially valuable to any prince facing complex political challenges. But fame also brings dangers that were absent when you were simply another anonymous court jester trying to survive through wit and Discretion. The most immediate consequence of your enhanced reputation is increased attention from intelligence services throughout Europe, as various powers attempt to recruit someone with your proven capabilities and unique knowledge of Italian political dynamics. The recruitment attempts range from generous financial offers to subtle threats, but all reflect recognition that your expertise could significantly influence the outcome of future conflicts. Your response to these overtures requires careful balance between maintaining your value to your current patron and avoiding the appearance of being permanently unavailable to other potential employers. Complete loyalty to Urbino might seem admirable, but it can also make you seem limited in scope and potentially expendable if circumstances change. Excessive availability might provide short-term financial benefits, but would destroy the trust relationships that make you genuinely useful to anyone. The art of managing multiple relationships without betraying essential commitments, you reflect during a conversation with Alessandro Strozzi, requires the same skills that made me successful as a court jester, the ability to speak truthfully to different audiences while maintaining plausible deniability about any statements that might prove inconvenient later. Strozzi, whose own survival has depended on navigating similar challenges, offers practical advice about managing the transition from anonymous advisor to recognized expert. Fame is a tool that can provide protection and opportunities, he observes, but it's also a weapon that your enemies can use against you. The key is controlling the narrative about your capabilities and motivations so that your reputation serves your interests rather than undermining them. The conversation leads to development of a comprehensive strategy for managing your enhanced profile while preserving the flexibility and security that allowed you to survive previous crises. The approach involves selective engagement with potential new clients, careful management of public statements about political issues, and maintaining strong relationships with current allies while avoiding commitments that might limit future options. Your first major test of this strategy comes when agents representing the King of France approach you with an offer to serve as an advisor on Italian political affairs in preparation for expanded French intervention in the peninsula. The position would provide enormous financial rewards and potential influence on European politics, but it would also require betraying both your current patron and your broader commitment to Italian independence. The French offer represents the kind of opportunity that could transform your entire career. You acknowledge during discussions with the Duke's advisors, but accepting it would require abandoning principles that have guided my political development and relationships that have sustained me through previous crises. Your decision to decline the French offer while maintaining cordial relations with their representatives demonstrates the kind of principled flexibility that enhances rather than undermines your reputation for reliability. By clearly explaining your reasoning and suggesting alternative ways the French might benefit from your expertise without requiring exclusive commitment, you preserve relationships while maintaining your essential loyalties. But the French approach also reveals the broader implications of your growing reputation. As European powers prepare for expanded intervention in Italian affairs, advisors with genuine expertise in Italian politics become increasingly valuable strategic assets. Your choice of employer could influence the outcome of conflicts that will reshape the political structure of the entire continent. The weight of these implications creates new forms of professional pressure that are different from, but potentially as dangerous as the direct physical threats you faced in previous crises. The knowledge that your decisions could influence the fate of millions of people is both inspiring and terrifying, requiring a level of moral responsibility that exceeds anything demanded of traditional court entertainers. As 1517 dawns, the political situation that originally drove your defection from Florence has evolved into a continental crisis that will determine whether Italian independence can survive the convergence of French ambition, imperial power, and papal politics. your position as a trusted advisor to one of Italy's most successful independent princes provides a unique vantage point for observing and potentially influencing developments that will shape European history. The broader strategic situation reveals patterns that individual political crises often obscure. The gradual erosion of the medieval political structure that allowed small, independent states to survive through diplomatic flexibility and strategic alliances. The emerging order increasingly favors large territorial monarchies with the resources to maintain professional armies and bureaucratic administrations that smaller powers cannot match. Your intelligence analysis for the Duke focuses on understanding how these broad historical trends create both opportunities and constraints for Urbino's long-term survival. The traditional Italian model of competitive independence, you report, requires modification to address the realities of continental warfare and centralized state power. The assessment leads to exploration of innovative approaches to maintaining effective independence within the emerging European political structure. Instead of competing directly with large territorial monarchies, smaller states might survive by specializing in particular capabilities that make them valuable as allies rather than attractive as conquest targets. Urbino's specialization in diplomatic innovation and intelligence analysis, capabilities that you've helped develop, represents one possible model for small state survival in the new political environment. By making themselves indispensable as problem solvers and information sources, small states might preserve practical autonomy even when formal independence becomes impossible. Your role in developing and implementing this strategy provides professional satisfaction that exceeds anything you experienced as a traditional court entertainer. Instead of simply amusing powerful people, you're helping to solve fundamental problems of political survival and historical adaptation. The work requires all the skills you've developed over your career, while also demanding new capabilities that push you toward genuine expertise in statcraft and strategic planning. But the expanded scope of your responsibilities also creates vulnerability to the kind of systemic changes that individual competence cannot address. If the political structure that makes your expertise valuable disappears, even the most successful advisors might find themselves obsolete regardless of their personal capabilities or professional relationships. The possibility of systemic obsolescence requires developing backup strategies that don't depend on the continuation of current political arrangements. Your growing reputation provides options for adaptation to changing circumstances, but only if you maintain the flexibility and strategic thinking that originally enabled your survival as a court jester. The fundamental challenge, you realize, during one of your reflective moments, is preserving the capacity for reinvention that allowed me to survive previous crises, while also developing the deep expertise that makes me valuable in current circumstances. The balance between specialization and adaptability becomes increasingly important as the political environment continues evolving in directions that might either enhance or eliminate the demand for your particular combination of skills and knowledge. Your correspondence with other advisors throughout Italy reveals that the challenge of adaptation is widespread among people whose careers depend on political relationships and strategic expertise. Everyone is struggling to understand how their current positions might evolve or disappear as European politics undergoes fundamental transformation. The shared nature of the challenge creates opportunities for cooperation and mutual support among people who might otherwise view each other as competitors for limited opportunities. By maintaining relationships with advisors serving different masters, you create information networks and potential collaboration opportunities that might prove crucial if individual patron relationships become inadequate for professional survival. The eruption of religious controversy following Martin Luther's challenge to papal authority in late 1517 creates a new dimension of political complexity that transforms every existing alliance calculation and strategic assessment throughout Europe. The religious crisis affects not just church politics, but fundamental legitimacy structures that support secular authority, making previous political arrangements potentially obsolete overnight. Your analysis of the Lutheran challenge focuses on its implications for Italian political stability and the survival strategies of independent princes who have built their power on careful balance between secular and religious authority. Luther's challenge to papal supremacy, you report to the Duke, creates opportunities for princes who have felt constrained by ecclesiastical pressure, but it also threatens the religious unity that has provided ideological foundation for Christian political cooperation. The assessment proves prescient as Italian princes begin choosing sides in the religious controversy, based more on political calculation than theological conviction. Princes with grievances against papal policies see Lutheranism as potential justification for resistance, while those who benefit from church support view religious reform as dangerous precedent for broader challenges to established authority. Duke Francesco Maria's response demonstrates the sophisticated political thinking that has kept Urbino independent despite pressure from much larger powers. Rather than choosing sides immediately in the religious controversy, he focuses on understanding how the crisis might be exploited to advance Urbino's essential interests while avoiding the risks of premature commitment to either Catholic or Protestant positions. The religious controversy creates fluidity in European alliance patterns, he observes during strategy discussions, but it also creates new forms of ideological conflict that might prove more dangerous than traditional political competition. Your role in analyzing the religious crisis requires understanding theological arguments and their political implications, areas of expertise that extend beyond your traditional focus on personality analysis and diplomatic strategy. The challenge forces you to develop new analytical capabilities while also maintaining the political relationships that depend on your existing expertise. The most complex aspect of managing the Lutheran crisis involves balancing Urbino's relationship with the Vatican, recently restored through your diplomatic efforts, with opportunities to exploit papal weakness in pursuit of expanded ducal independence. Supporting Luther too openly would destroy the reconciliation you helped achieve, but failing to exploit papal vulnerability might waste opportunities that will never recur. Your solution involves developing a position that presents Urbino as committed to religious reform within the Catholic Church while remaining loyal to legitimate papal authority. The distinction allows the Duke to criticize specific papal policies while avoiding the appearance of supporting Protestant rebellion against Catholic unity. His Excellency's commitment to Catholic reform, you draft in one policy statement, reflects his desire to strengthen rather than weaken the spiritual foundations of Christian political cooperation. The formulation provides flexibility for supporting various reform initiatives while maintaining plausible commitment to Catholic orthodoxy, allowing Urbino to benefit from anti-papal sentiment without becoming vulnerable to charges of heresy or rebellion. The strategy proves effective in maintaining political relationships while the religious crisis develops, but it also requires constant adjustment as the theological and political implications of Lutheranism become clearer. Your success in managing this challenge establishes your reputation as someone capable of navigating even the most complex ideological controversies while preserving essential political relationships. But the religious crisis also reveals the limitations of purely political approaches to problems that involve fundamental questions of truth, morality, and spiritual authority. Some conflicts cannot be resolved through diplomatic creativity and strategic flexibility, requiring choices that necessarily alienate some parties, regardless of how skillfully they are managed. The constant pressure of navigating increasingly Complex political crises, while maintaining the persona of entertaining court jester, begins to exact a psychological toll that threatens both your professional effectiveness and personal well-being. The strain of living multiple identities simultaneously, spy, diplomat, entertainer, analyst, advisor, creates internal tensions that become increasingly difficult to manage through wit and strategic thinking alone. Your private moments become dominated by questions about identity, loyalty, and moral responsibility that have no clear answers within the framework of Renaissance political realism. The skills that enabled your survival as a court jester require emotional detachment and cynical assessment of human motivations. But the responsibilities of diplomatic advisory work demand genuine commitment to principles and relationships that transcend immediate self-interest. The successful courtier you reflect during one of your increasingly frequent periods of introspection must be simultaneously sincere and calculating, loyal and opportunistic, principled and flexible. The psychological strain of maintaining these contradictions eventually becomes unsustainable. The internal crisis manifests in various ways that begin affecting your professional performance. Increasing difficulty with the kind of morally ambiguous decisions that diplomatic work requires. Growing reluctance to exploit intelligence that might harm people who trust you. Persistent questioning of whether your contributions to political stability justify the personal betrayals required to obtain sensitive information. Your relationship with Duke Francesco Maria becomes complicated by awareness that your value to Bob him depends partly on capabilities that you're finding increasingly difficult to exercise without moral reservation. The Duke needs an advisor who can recommend ruthless policies when circumstances require them. But you're developing ethical constraints that limit your willingness to provide such recommendations. Marco, the Duke observes during one of your private consultations, you seem to be struggling with aspects of your work that previously presented no difficulties. Perhaps the pressures of our recent successes have created burdens that require attention. His tactful acknowledgement of your internal struggles provides opportunity for honest discussion about the psychological costs of political advisory work and potential solutions that might preserve your effectiveness while addressing your moral concerns. The conversation leads to exploration of modified role definitions that might allow you to continue providing valuable service while avoiding the dividing kinds of activities that have become personally problematic. Instead of comprehensive political advisory work, you might specialize in diplomatic problem-solving and strategic analysis, while leaving implementation of harsh policies to advisors with fewer ethical constraints. Your unique value, the Duke suggests, lies in creative approaches to apparently impossible problems and insights into human motivations that others miss. Those capabilities don't require the kind of moral flexibility that seems to be causing you difficulty. The proposed modification of your responsibilities provides potential resolution of your internal crisis while preserving your professional relationship with the Duke. But it also represents acknowledgement that personal growth and changing values might make some career paths unsustainable, even when they continue to offer external rewards. Your acceptance of the modified role requires honest assessment of your evolving priorities and recognition that professional success might need to be redefined in terms that include personal integrity and moral consistency. The decision represents a form of maturity that transcends the survival strategies that originally shaped your career as a court jester. But the changes also create new vulnerabilities, since specialized expertise might prove less valuable than comprehensive political advisory capabilities if circumstances change in ways that reduce demand for diplomatic problem-solving. Your survival continues to depend on successfully anticipating and adapting to developments that you can influence, but not control. As your reputation as a diplomatic innovator spreads throughout Italy and beyond, You begin receiving inquiries from younger people seeking advice about careers in political advisory work. The requests for mentorship force you to articulate lessons. Learn from your unique journey from desperate survival to recognized expertise, while also confronting questions about what kind of legacy your career might represent. The most frequent questions from aspiring advisors focus on practical matters: how to develop useful skills, how to identify reliable patrons, how to avoid the mistakes that destroy promising careers. But underlying these practical concerns are deeper questions about the moral implications of political advisory work and whether it's possible to maintain personal integrity while serving masters whose actions might conflict with ethical principles. The fundamental challenge. You explain to one particularly thoughtful young man seeking career guidance is developing the ability to serve effectively without losing the capacity for independent moral judgment. Political advisory work requires understanding power relationships and strategic calculations, but it also requires maintaining enough personal autonomy to recognize when those calculations conflict with basic human decency. Your advice emphasizes the importance of developing multiple capabilities rather than specializing too narrowly in particular techniques or relationships. Survival in political advisory work depends on adaptability, and adaptability requires broad-based competence that can be applied to various situations and challenges. But you also emphasize the importance of establishing personal boundaries that define what kinds of activities you will and won't engage in regardless of professional incentives. Without clear ethical limits, you warn, political advisory work becomes a gradual process of moral corruption that eventually destroys both personal integrity and professional effectiveness. The mentorship conversations force you to evaluate your own career choices and consider whether your survival strategies provide useful models for others or represent unique responses to circumstances that might not be replicable. The question has practical implications for the advice you provide, but it also has personal significance for how you understand your own achievements and failures. Your reflection on potential legacy leads to a writing project, a confidential memoir that documents your experiences and insights for potential use by future generations of political advisors. The manuscript combines practical guidance with philosophical reflection on the relationship between individual survival and political service, personal integrity and professional success. The life of a court jester, you write in one particularly reflective passage, provides unique preparation for understanding the gap between appearance and reality in political affairs. The skills required for entertaining powerful people, reading audiences, managing expectations, providing what people need rather than what they claim to want, translate directly into the capabilities needed for effective political advisory work. But you also document the costs of such work and the psychological challenges that accompany sustained exposure to the moral ambiguities of power relationships. Success in political advisory work, you observe, requires developing tolerance for moral complexity that can gradually erode the capacity for ethical judgment if not carefully managed. The memoir serves multiple purposes: professional documentation that might be useful for historical analysis, personal therapy that helps you process difficult experiences, and potential guidance for future advisors who might benefit from understanding both the opportunities and dangers of political service. Your writing also provides framework for evaluating your current situation and making decisions about the future direction of your career. The process of articulation helps clarify your evolving priorities and identify potential modifications in your professional approach that might better serve both your personal values and your practical objectives. The legacy question ultimately becomes a question about the relationship between individual choice and historical forces, personal agency and structural constraints, moral idealism, and political realism. Your career represents one example of how these tensions might be navigated, but not necessarily a model that others should emulate without careful consideration of their own circumstances and values. By 1520, your evolution from desperate court jester to respected diplomatic advisor represents a transformation that few people in your original circumstances could have imagined possible. But success also brings awareness to political careers, like theatrical performances, must eventually reach their conclusion, and that the art of ending well is as important as the techniques required for achieving initial success. The immediate catalyst for reconsidering your long-term plans comes from changes in the broader European political situation that reduced demand for the kind of diplomatic innovation that made your career possible. The consolidation of power by large territorial monarchies limits opportunities for the creative problem-solving that small independent states previously required, making specialized expertise in Italian political dynamics less valuable than comprehensive knowledge of continental power relationships. The political environment that enabled my career, you acknowledged during discussions with Duke Francesco Maria, is disappearing as European politics becomes dominated by competition between major powers rather than complex negotiations among numerous independent actors. The assessment leads to exploration of career modifications that might preserve your usefulness while adapting to changing circumstances. Options include transitioning to more traditional diplomatic service, developing expertise in continental rather than regional politics, or retiring from active political work while maintaining consulting relationships with selected clients. Your preference involves a gradual transition that preserves your relationship with Urbino while also providing opportunities for writing and teaching that might contribute to the development of diplomatic expertise among future generations. The approach would allow you to leverage your experience while avoiding the risks of complete dependence on political relationships that might prove unstable. Your contributions to our success, the Duke acknowledges, have established a foundation for Urbino's continued independence that will survive changes in the broader political environment. But your knowledge and insights could also benefit a much wider audience through writing and instruction that preserves diplomatic innovations for future use. The Duke's support for your modified career plans reflects both genuine appreciation for past service and practical recognition that your evolving priorities might make continued intensive political advisory work less effective than alternative arrangements that provide greater personal satisfaction. Your transition begins with completion of your memoir and development of more systematic documentation of diplomatic techniques and strategic analysis methods that might be useful for future practitioners. The writing process requires revisiting experiences that are sometimes painful to remember, but it also provides opportunities for understanding their broader significance and potential value for others. The most challenging aspect of career transition involves managing relationships with people who have relied on your advice and support during difficult periods. Diplomatic advisory work creates personal bonds that transcend professional relationships, and ending such arrangements requires careful attention to ongoing obligations and mutual interests. Your solution involves gradual reduction of intensive advisory work while maintaining availability for consultation on specific issues that might benefit from your unique expertise. The arrangement preserves important relationships while also providing the flexibility needed for pursuing writing and teaching opportunities. As you prepare for what might be your final formal performance as court jester, a ceremonial entertainment celebrating the 5th anniversary of the papal reconciliation you helped negotiate. You reflect on the journey that transformed survival strategies into genuine expertise, desperate opportunism into principled service, and personal betrayal into diplomatic innovation. The performance itself combines elements from throughout your career. The wit and timing that originally attracted noble attention, the intelligence analysis that made you valuable as an advisor, the diplomatic creativity that enabled resolution of seemingly impossible conflicts, and the personal growth that allowed you to maintain integrity while serving powerful masters. Your Excellency, distinguished guests, you begin with the formal flourish that tradition requires. Tonight we celebrate not just political agreements, but the possibility of human wisdom overcoming seemingly irreconcilable differences. Not just political agreements, but the possibility of human wisdom overcoming seemingly irreconcilable differences. The entertainment that follows weaves together themes from your entire career, while also providing subtle commentary on the broader historical forces that are reshaping European politics. Your final performance as court jester serves as both conclusion to one career phase and introduction to whatever might follow. As applause echoes through the great hall of the ducal palace, you realize that your transformation from desperate survival to recognized expertise represents not just personal achievement, but evidence of possibilities that exist within even the most constraining circumstances. The journey that began with a joke about royal infidelity concludes with understanding that humor, intelligence, and moral courage can indeed change the world, one performance at a time. Your bow to the assembled nobility marks not just the end of an evening's entertainment, but the completion of a career that proved court jesters could be far more than amusing diversions. They could be agents of diplomatic revolution, preserving the peace and independence that allow civilization to flourish. The bells on your costume jingle one final time as you exit the stage, but the legacy of creative problem-solving and principled service will continue to influence political relationships. Long after the laughter fades and the last candle is extinguished,